friends. This is Tony Buchert with the Armor of God on the web. And before I get into today's topic, don't forget to like, subscribe, and if you feel like it, even share today's video. And while you're at it, go ahead and ring that YouTube bell if you would. Well, I find myself today in the book of Corinthians, the first book of Corinthians, chapter 11, verses 1 through 2. And I want to start here because it's going to introduce us into a tradition that has really been around since the days of creation itself, a memorial, if you will. The Apostle Paul, writing to the church in Corinth, he talks about some traditions. He says this, he says, "Imitate me, just as I also imitate Christ." And that's very important to understand and to keep in context what we're going to talk about today, because the early apostles, they didn't come up with anything new as far as doctrines or traditions. They simply handed down to the early church what Jesus Christ had handed down to them. And there's some important traditions that we're going to look at today, but specifically one that we're going to examine in really good detail here. He says, "Now I praise you, brethren, that you remember me in all things and keep the traditions just as I have delivered them to you." Now the word tradition here can be a little bit muddy and not so clear in the English, but when you get down to the Greek and what it means the paradosis. The paradosis is the Greek, and really what it means is this: the traditions, the ordinances, and this is Strong's number 3062, the Christian connections or the Christian doctrines. So what he's saying here is keep the traditions, the doctrines, those connections that I got from Christ, just as I have delivered them to you. And the tradition I want to talk about today goes all the way back to the days of creation, that connects us to the days of creation, and also a future event, if you will. Now, what I want to talk about today is the day of Christian worship. What day should that be? Now, there's a lot of different ideas out there about what day we should worship on, how we should worship God. But really, we find ourselves, friends, in this, we've often said, this ready-made world. We walk through life, yours truly, I'm no different. I do the same thing that you do. We're born, we're raised, we go into these traditions, and we very rarely in life really get down to question ourselves as to why we do the things that we do, or why we worship the way that we do. We just kind of go in this auto mode, never really questioning things. But is there a day that God expects us to worship on? Because that's key and vital to understanding today's topic. Because oftentimes we'll say, well, I do things for this reason, or I worship God on this day for that reason. And very rarely do we find ourselves asking the question, what does God want? What does God expect? What is important to Him? And oftentimes we miss out on that question, and we miss out on a very important answer to that question by not simply considering God. Now, in the world of Christendom, there are basically 2 days in which people observe. They will observe the Sabbath day, which is Saturday. That's undisputed, the 7th day of the week. Historians will also tell you that there are no lost days, there is no confusion. The 7th day is the Sabbath day, undisputed. That's not an issue of debate. Or some people will keep Sunday. Does it matter? Does it matter to God? And if it does matter to God, can we prove it by simply making a connection and attaching and associating ourselves with an event in creation that shows us just the importance of the Sabbath day? But before I get into that part of it, let's acknowledge something. Now, in the world of Christendom, people will tell you really a couple different things. Saturday's been done away with. Saturday, the Sabbath, is Jewish. Sunday's okay. It's not really important. Matter of fact, you can even keep any day that you want to. Now, I'm not saying that with any kind of scriptural relevance here. Matter of fact, in the book of Romans, we see where that premise is made and oftentimes pointed to, that we really don't have to keep any associated day with the Bible. It's just whatever day you find important to you to keep. And in verse 1 of 14, we read this: "Receive one who is weak in the faith, but not to disputes over doubtful things. For one believes that he may eat all things, but he who is weak only eats vegetables." Okay, he's going down through this whole monologue of judging people based on what they eat. People are weak in the faith. Some people are eating meat. Some people are just eating vegetables. But then he skip on down here to verse 5, and that's really where the controversy begins. He says, "One person esteems one day above another. Another esteems every day alike." There's no difference. We're just walking through life. One day is just the same as another. But is there a day to God that is more important than the rest of the days of the week? We're going to get through this here in just a short time. Let each be fully convinced in his own mind. He who observes the day, observes it to the Lord, and he who does not observe the day to the Lord, he does not observe it. He who eats to the Lord, for he gives God thanks. Who does not eat to the Lord, he does not eat and gives God thanks. So here we have this premise, this erroneous premise, that any day, as long as we esteem it above another day, and we set it aside for God, to take some time to put Him first, to worship Him the way that we choose to worship Him. It could be a Monday, it could be a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, or Saturday, or Sunday. Some people tell you it does not matter. But friends, we're asking the wrong question. Just kind of going back to what I said initially, the question of when and how we should worship always reverts to the Creator. Now, I want to get back to this connection of this memorial. Now, the seventh day has always been special to our Creator. He called it a day of rest. It's not supposed to be a day in which we engage ourselves in our normal vocational things that we do, work-related things. It's supposed to be a day in which we set aside to worship our Creator. And it's just so unfortunate that people are missing out on this connection to God because of some of the false, erroneous doctrines that are out there, and really God's truth and what He expects gets put to the wayside. But way back in the book of Genesis, because I said we're going to talk about a tradition that is as old as time itself. And this is why we can say that the seventh-day Sabbath is, in fact, a memorial and important to our Creator. Way back in the book of Genesis, the beginning, that's what Genesis means. It means the beginning of history for mankind. And we come down to this creation account in which God was virtually done with the creation. He comes to this day called the seventh day, the Sabbath day. And maybe that's in your headline in your Bible right above chapter 2 of the book of Genesis, as it is mine. And this is what we read. We read, "Thus the heavens and the earth and all the host of them were finished." So He's done with creation. He's done with all of it. "And on the seventh day, God ended His work which He had done, and He rested on the seventh day from His work which He had done." So what was this, a Tuesday? Wednesday, Thursday, Monday? Was it a Sunday? No. Historians are clear. And the debate, there really is none over what the seventh day is. In the English, we call it Saturday. But in every other vernacular of the world, it is oftentimes referred to in their own language as the Sabbath because it is very, very special. Why is it special? Because this is the only day of the week in which God truly places His name and His presence and His expectations as the day of worship. Right from the pages of our Bible, from the book of Genesis, the beginnings, we have right here the connection that is made to the day of worship and our Creator as a day that is memorialized for eternity. Let's just read this and then I'll get to a different aspect of today's topic that I want to just bring to your attention. Some admissions, if you will, from all the different various Christian groups that talk about what day is the proper day for worship. "Then God blessed the seventh day." What day did He bless? First day? The fifth day? The third day? No. "Then God blessed the seventh day," that is the Sabbath, "and He sanctified it, because in it He rested from all His work which God had created and made." The seventh day, special? Significant? Absolutely. God took that day, separated it, made it special, sanctified it, placed His name into it. So we see that there is a direct connection to the Sabbath and creation as, in fact, a memorial. That can't be changed. This is a memorial that God set up and consequently became a major tradition of the New Testament church. And do you realize that millions upon millions of Christians, and believe me, friends, this is not a critique, this is not a criticism, this is not a harsh judgment, but the reality of it is, as just an issue of truth, that there is no scriptural evidence for Christians to observe a Sunday as the day of worship over Saturday. Now, some of you have heard that the day was changed from Saturday, Sunday based on the resurrection of Jesus Christ. But let me read to you a confession that was made. Now, some of you may be familiar with this article that I have in front of me. For some of you, this may be the first time introduction to a man by the name of Cardinal Gibbons, who is a Catholic priest who wrote an article called Roman Catholic and Protestant Confessions About Saturday. And this is what some of the world's scholars in the Christendom world, what they say about the Sabbath day and the importance thereof. It says, by a man by the name of Edward Hiscox, he wrote the Baptist Manual, writes this: there was and is a commandment to keep the holy Sabbath day, but the Sabbath day was not on Sunday. It will be said, however, and with some show of triumph, that the Sabbath was transferred from the seventh day of the week. Where can the record of such transaction be found? Not in the New Testament, of course. I quite well know that Sunday did not come into use in the early Christian church as a religious day, as we learn from the Christian fathers and other sources, but what a pity that it comes branded with the mark of paganism and christened with the name of a sun god when adopted and sanctioned by the papal apostasy and bequeathed as a sacred legacy to Protestantism. Furthermore, the Sabbath, this is written by the Moody Bible Institute, Sabbath was before Sinai. The Sabbath was binding in Eden, and it was and has been enforced ever since. This fourth commandment begins with the word remember, showing that the Sabbath had already existed when God wrote the law on the tablets of stone at Sinai. How can men claim that this one commandment has been done away with when they admit that the other 9 are still binding? Well, friends, certainly this is a huge topic of which time will not allow me to really dissect this and give the attention that it really deserves. That's why we'd like to have you reach out to us by email if you want to at info@cgi.org, or you can hit us up on the World Wide Web at cgi.org to further learn about this topic of the Sabbath as a memorial and order Sabbath, a memorial connection. Well, friends, we are simply out of time today. Don't forget to share and like and subscribe and hit that bell on YouTube. And this is Tony Buchert with the Armor of God on the web saying, you put on that armor of God. Until next time, and we'll see you again here on the World Wide Web.
The Church of God International would like to introduce the availability of a new app designed for your convenience. Download it now.